Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, Passionate Investing community. Let's start with a quick update on my book, Passionate Living Through Passive Investing. So we are still #1 on the new releases in commercial real estate on Amazon. And I want to thank all of my loyal listeners and viewers who bought a copy and left a review. However, today we are here to talk to Alina Trigub. I have the pleasure of interviewing another great author and founder of SAMO Financial. We'll talk about her great recent release, Your Legacy on Main Street, her recent TEDx talk, and her syndication business. And with that, I want to say welcome to the show, Alina.
George, great to be here again. It's always exciting. Congratulations on your book. Because I released my book recently, I know how much work goes into working on a book and then finally publishing it. So congratulations, a huge step. And I'm sure your listeners appreciate reading your book and will greatly benefit from it.
Yes, it is a huge step. And definitely, I want to talk about the process of writing the book, which, as you mentioned, is huge. I learned so much through it. But first, I want to dive into the material here. And I just read it last week. It's a great book. I found a lot of value for experienced investors. But I would say more importantly, there's a lot of help for beginners. And there are a lot of beginning investors out there. And that's very important. I know one of the things you have for beginning investors, you got a 7-step program, something that really walks you through the process, how you go from where you are now, maybe working a W-2 job, to where you sit at the head of your own company and able to not only have passive income yourself, but generate that for others. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what will newer investors find in your book.
For sure, George, and thank you for that. Because how I started and where I started was being an immigrant, which your listeners can probably hear from my accent. When I came to this country with my mom over 30 years ago, we essentially started with nothing. And living in poverty taught me a few things. It taught me that there are ways to survive, and also because there was no way back, we were looking for the step forward. And luckily, in my case, I first got my degree in accounting, and that helped me to learn the essentials of accounting and the basics of bookkeeping. But then after that point, I decided that I wanted to change our financial position, and I wanted to help my mom and myself to get out of the poverty and start building wealth at that point for us. And then later on, when I got married, for the future generations, for the kids that my husband and I plan to have and now have. And so one of the chapters in my book covers the 7 steps to building generational wealth. You don't have to have anything. You can start with nothing, just like I did, and slowly go through the steps of building wealth by essentially living below your means and putting money away and investing it. And since majority of us have access to Wall Street, whether it's through 401ks or the IRAs that a lot of us have and open at our employers and outside of our employers, that's typically one of the first natural steps that people take to put the money away. But then what I talk about is continuing to diversify your investments and investing beyond Wall Street into Main Street. And for those listeners that are not familiar with what Main Street entails, Main Street is essentially everything you invest in outside of Wall Street. So Wall Street is the stock market, where Main Street identifies everything else, whether it's real estate, businesses, gold, oil, and so forth. Everything that you want to invest outside of buying a stock, in other words, physically investing in, exemplifies Main Street. And I encourage people to have a well-diversified portfolio by investing in both Wall Street and Main Street. And that's what one of these chapters defines. I mean, I can talk about other chapters in the book if you'd like, George, but I'll let you.
Well, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, a lot of things I'd like to just comment on there. First of all, starting out in accounting, I think that's beautiful, totally underrated. If you understand accounting, you understand the lifeblood of your business. I think that's just a wonderful way to start. And the advice you have for people, I would say simple, but not easy, right? Live below your means, right? It sounds simple, but definitely not easy. You can do these things. Listeners, if you're out there and you feel, I don't feel like I can ever experience prosperity, I'm not going to be rich in my lifetime. If you take the time, yes, you can do it. But these things, they're not necessarily easy to do, but a lot of people they've walked the path. And I do love the authenticity that comes through your story. I mean, you can really feel it. I mean, you came here with nothing and you really pull yourself up by your bootstraps, a beautiful example of that. And it can happen. It can happen within a single generation. And you make, in fact, your entire book, even the title, is a very, very important point. As I like to say, you don't beat the pack by running with the pack. And, everybody, as you said, has access to Wall Street. It's easy. All you have to do is put your money in there and you hope that things go well. And often they do. But yeah, very good. I've seen people make two mistakes. Like you said, diversify. Wall Street's good, but it shouldn't be your only thing. If you have all your money in Wall Street, you can expect to possibly lose as much as half if we have a major recession. That's not uncommon. A major stock market crash could be 20 to 50%. But if you have some diversification, right, for real estate, that's beautiful. But the other mistake I see people do, and I'll be honest with you, I made a mistake myself, is put too much money in real estate and be illiquid. So I hope everybody out there learn the lessons of the people who've gone before. Have some cash, have some money in stocks, and definitely diversify. I would say throughout all of private equity. And I like the way you define Main Street. It's more than just investing in residential real estate or even commercial real estate. Literally everything, but only if you know the trick.
Yeah, no, 100%. I couldn't agree more with you, George. And to add to your point, even political events can influence the stock market, and we all are waiting presidential election coming up very soon. So that will also have an impact on the stock market, and who knows which way it's going to go, and then what the new president will bring to the White House with all the new legislature will have an impact as well on which way the stock market is going to go after that, as well as the Fed's decision. We still have, 2 more meetings left this year. We can anticipate the soft landing and potential cuts, but who knows what that decision is going to be at the next meeting in about a week and a half.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, of course, they rose quickly, right? Hiked the rates quicker than ever in history. They started out with a half-point rate cut, and that's where we're at. Cliffhanger. We don't know.
Yeah.
We shall see. Well, your book covers a lot of things, including, let's just get right, I think, back to the beginning. As you mentioned, this is not the first time I've interviewed Alina. Hopefully you go back, listen to that prior interview where we focused a lot on her particular business, SAMO Financial. And we will talk about that today, but definitely we're going to extend the interview. We're going to talk about a lot of new things as well. You are someone who's truly an expert in syndication. But for a lot of our listeners, might even be hearing that for the first time. So tell us, what is real estate syndication? What does that open up to the ordinary investor?
Absolutely, George. And that's one of the things that my book covers as well. So for someone who is new to passive real estate investing and syndication in particular, what they need to understand is if they want to invest in real estate, have the funds, but have very limited time because of their busy career or being busy maybe as a business owner or family or hobbies and whatnot, the real estate syndication allows you to invest in real estate primarily without day-to-day interruption to your day-to-day activities. Of course, there is a learning curve up front. You need to learn what real estate syndications are about, how they operate, and you need to learn how to read the documents. But once you learn all that, you can easily review the offerings and decide whether that's the offering you want to invest. And in a nutshell, what real estate syndication is about is when a group of people pull their funds together into the LLC, limited liability company, and invest to buy a large real estate or a large portfolio of maybe residential. It doesn't have to be residential. It could be commercial real estate, pretty much anything. In that group, there are two subcategories. One subcategory of investors are general partners, people that do all the work in that syndication, which entails finding the property, negotiating, buying it, and then managing, and then paying investors distributions. The other subcategory, or the other group, is passive investors or limited partners. These are the people that invest their money and let the general partners do all the work. So they essentially, limited partners, have no say in the decision making. All they do is they invest their money and let the GPs or general partners run the syndication. Now, because they have no say, they have also no liabilities on a very high level. So they're not responsible or liable for anything. And that entails them trusting the general partners to do the work and be able to generate income and pay the distributions to passive investors. And some of the other things that my book will cover, in addition to how to understand syndications, it has a whole chapter on the terminology that used in the real estate syndication offerings. Also, as a former tax accountant, it has a chapter on various tax advantages and disadvantages in real estate investing, as well as the ways that you can find not just opportunities to invest in real estate syndications, but also ways to identify where you can get the funding to fund your investments. Because the only thing that or the main thing that we potentially think about is having cash in our accounts. But some other examples, I'll just mention a couple of examples so people know what I'm talking about. You can also invest your IRA money. So in addition to investing IRA funds into the stock market, there is a way to invest IRA money into the real estate syndication by turning your account from being directed by an investment custodian, turning it into the self-directed IRA, which, as the term suggests, allows you to self-direct where you invest your money. Another way to fund your syndication is to potentially tap into your 401k account. You can get a loan from 401k and invest that money into the syndication. Now, I'm not here to suggest that that's the way you do it, because each source of funding has its pros and cons, and I quickly touch upon them in the book. But all I'm doing in my book is giving you suggestions as to where you can tap into potential money that you can use to invest into syndication, and what are the pros and cons of tapping into one or another source of funding for syndication investing and whatnot. Those are a few examples of several chapters that I cover in my book that will greatly, greatly benefit novice investors or people that are not familiar or have very basic understanding of what syndications are.
Yeah, very, very important. And I remember my first syndication, being walked through all the paperwork. I think, for me, I was not scared off by it, but I could see how a lot of investors are going to look at a 100-page PPM and say, this is crazy. I don't understand it. And then paying a lawyer to look at it is probably cost prohibitive unless you're investing a very large amount of money. And so a lot of people will be left out. So I think that's a huge service to the community. You mentioned how a lot of people, maybe you're smart enough to invest in real estate, but you don't have the time, right? You're good at what you do. You might be a business owner. Maybe you're an executive at work. Regardless, there's no shame in staying in your lane. Somebody like Michael Phelps, he did not become one of the greatest Olympians of all time trying to compete with Britney Spears singing and dancing on stage, right? I mean, he just gets out there, he swims every day. And if that's you and you're just good at what you do, and but you know that you need to diversify a little better or a little bit more. I mean, I think syndication is a great way to go because, as you mentioned in your book, I think you have an entire chapter on this, active versus passive real estate. Some people will say, hey, I got a rental property, it's passive income, but that's not really the case.
Absolutely. And they can get the phone call at any point in time, whether it's night or whether they're on vacation. If a tenant needs something, hey, you got to attend to a tenant, and you have to take care of the emergency issue. Unless you have a reliable PM whom you have to pay, in a lot of cases, 10 to 20%, a lot of the work will be on you. And that it does not entail passive. With syndication, you do not get the calls neither from property manager nor from the general partners. Why? Because the general partners are the ones that are responsible for everything. And, we're not here to promote that syndication is the best thing that can happen to you. Everything has its pros and cons, including syndication, but we're here to open eyes to another opportunity that's out there, that's available, and that's not heavily advertised. Why? Because everywhere we look, we see Wall Street advertising. So, George, what you and I are doing essentially is sharing the knowledge that we've acquired over the years so that people can learn about this alternative way to not only invest into real estate passively, but also be able to take advantage of the various tax breaks that may not be available on Wall Street and are available when investing in real estate. And in some cases, they're only available to people that are full-time real estate investors and can claim real estate professional status. But some of the tax advantages equally apply to others that are working full-time jobs and can take advantage of the tax breaks offered to everyone equally.
Yeah, and those I think are huge points. First is that the syndication is a great way to have to get away, or to be able to get away from the tenants, termites, and tantrums, as I like to put it. And I mean, I could tell you stories all day long about property management, and even what makes it through property management, because they got to come and tell you if tenant A pulls a gun on tenant B. You got to be informed about all that. And even though they're taking care of it, it's a big problem. But taxes, that's huge. And I'm glad that you included that in your book, because I know a lot of people, even with financial backgrounds, people that are business owners, and they don't really know how to navigate the tax system. I believe we have over 60,000 pages of IRS code. Nobody understands the whole thing. But there are a few things that you can do to get far ahead. Of course, real estate is very tax advantaged. So very glad that you put that out there. Anything you want to add on the tax front?
Sure. So from a tax standpoint, I always tell people, if something that you read sounds interesting, always verify with your tax professional or CPA, whoever you're using. Even in my case, I'm not a CPA and I'm a former tax professional. So the learnings that I'm sharing in my book is what I learned over the years, either through my degree or by investing myself or by buying and syndicating properties through my personal experiences. So always review it, and then review it with your CPA. Why? Because not only that tax advantage may or may not apply to you, it may apply to you slightly different. Each tax law has its own way of being applied to a personal situation, so it needs to be reviewed by a tax professional to give you proper guidance to make sure that, yes, it's definitely something that you can take advantage of, whether it can be done now or whether it can be delayed for the future when it comes to passive losses.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, tax situations are individual, but also everybody's situation as an investor is very individual. And I love the way that your book, you really get into the idea of that we all have to sort of chart our own course. And I think your book has a lot of resources for that. Last couple chapters deal with making your individualized plan and setting your vision. So very, very good. Again, I think it's a great book, whether you're newer, you've never heard about syndications and other types of private equity, et cetera, or if you may be more advanced and just see, here's another great perspective on how to do things. Because I got to tell you, every book I read, I feel if I learn one thing that saves me from making a mistake, that book 1,000 times over. Or if I find something that makes me some money, that's worth the book, maybe 10,000 times over. But either way, love it, love it, love it. Beautiful. I wanted to talk about the process of writing the book too, because I know there's got to be a lot of people out here, a lot of our people, and we are really focused on entrepreneurship at the Foundry. So we do a few things. We talk a lot about commercial real estate and private equity. But this is really my love letter to the entrepreneurial world. And a lot of entrepreneurs, like us, been out there for many, many years doing it. They're already experts in their field, but they haven't gotten that book out yet. So I'd love to hear about your personal process through it. I know there's different ways you can go. You can go through a traditional publishing house. You can get coaching. You can self-publish, et cetera. How did you go from concept to published?
Sure, George. It's definitely a loaded question. And for me, the book was in the making for several years. It all came down to the fact that I first noticed that people were asking me same questions over and over again, and I kept repeating information. So I started by first writing articles. And at the beginning, when I started writing articles, and we're talking pre-ChatGPT time. So we're talking when the articles were written 100% by the author. I was just deciding which topic to cover. And then I noticed people are asking me the same questions. So I started writing articles based on the questions that my clients and audience were asking me. That kind of made my work easier because now I didn't have to make up the topic. I was just taking a question and answering it in an article. And then in the conversations with other investors and other founders, I noticed that people are using those articles to either create reports or create mini ebooks or even publish their own books. And that gave me an idea, which again is not new, but if someone else is doing it, why can't I do it? So I started researching how to write a book, what does it take, what resources can I use, what team members do I need to help me through that process. So I finally found what would be best for me, worked through that process, found the resources and the help that I needed to go through that, and I decided to self-publish the book on Amazon. So I found a few consultants that helped me with that process, and even with that help, this was still a lot of work. And then I learned that when you launch in your book, there are also resources and people that are experts in the field. So I even found a team that helped me to work through the launch, which was a whole process of its own. And I can tell you, as much of a work as it was to write the book, launching it and marketing it is a whole heavy, very involved process of its own, which I am still working on because my book has been launched only a month and a half ago. And so for those that are looking to do it, what I would say, if you have a book in your mind, definitely go for it, but be prepared that it will take a lot of your time. And, but if you know that at least one person will benefit from it, that you did something right. And I can tell you from personal experience, based on the notes that I'm getting, whether it's through email or LinkedIn or even through text, like one person said, I wish I had your book year and a half ago when I was starting out. Another client of mine said, I'm reading your book with my wife, and we have 4 grown-up daughters, and we're halfway done. And at this point, I decided that I'm going to buy 4 copies for my daughters and their husbands, just because I see how much value your book is bringing to my wife and I want to do the same for my kids. I want them to start early and essentially start benefiting from the book. When I see notes like that, that's music to my ears. I know I've done something right. I know that what I put on the paper will help other people to plant their trees and see the results 20, 30 years down the road, because they're starting early and because they're learning not from their own, but from my mistakes. And George, you mentioned you made a mistake. I made a ton of mistakes, and I tried to put all those mistakes in the book so that other people can benefit and skip that step of making that mistake on their own and just learn from my mistake and build their wealth and leave a legacy by quickly jumping through the hoops and being on the right path to create that wealth for themselves and for the future generations.
Beautiful and very inspiring. I know my notes from publishing my book and from launching it, which is a job in and of itself, hopefully will become a future book. I would like to help other authors and help entrepreneurs become authors, but not through a very expensive $5,000 or $6,000 program like I've seen, which I think is beautiful. I think for some people, a little bit of that hand-holding might be exactly what they need, but I would like to help people, I would say, just on a maybe a less white glove level, just write about it, write about my experiences. I've read probably at least a dozen books about self-publishing, and each one has taught me something valuable. So I want to make sure, though, before we wrap, that people do have an opportunity to reach out. What is the best way to reach out to Alina Trigub?
Thank you, George. They can reach me on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or they can email me directly at alina@samofinancial.com. And I'm really grateful for this interview, and thank you so much for inviting me again.
It's my pleasure. One of my favorites recently, I have to say, and for my son out there who is a huge fan of Russian culture, right now I think we have about 2 gallons of kompot in the fridge.
Oh my goodness, incredible.
Yes. So we'll have to check into maybe having some pickled herring at Thanksgiving dinner.
Sounds great. Thank you, George.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.